This is Dan Ferrisi, editor of Sound and Communications magazine. Happy to be joined this morning by Joé Lloyd, Senior Director of Communications for AVIXA, and Charmaine Torruella, Diversity Council Chair and GMS Account Manager for Verrex. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, Charmaine and Joey.
Thanks, Dan, for having us.
Thank you so much.
We're talking about an issue that is incredibly important in society at large, and it's becoming increasingly important in the commercial AV community, the commercial AV family. We want to talk about diversity, inclusion, and having embracing the heterogeneous nature of our industry family. The fact that we are not an old white boys club anymore. We have a whole diversity of people in our industry. We want to celebrate that. We want to bring that to the fore. So let's talk a little bit about what AVIXA is doing organizationally and the AVIXA Diversity Council is doing to embrace that fact and celebrate that fact.
Well, thanks, Dan. Thanks, Dan, for bringing that up. I think that diversity, equity, inclusion, and truly belonging is the emphasis of what we're getting at. And with AVIXA, we recently launched a forward-facing, outward pledge and discussion to be had on the topic. And the pledge is really that first step toward standing up and saying, yes, I believe that we need to be hearing from more of the diverse voices across the industry, people of color, women, those with neurodiversity. All of those people need to be represented across the amazing work that we do.
So can you give us some insight before we even get into the details of the pledge, which I really do want to kind of dive deep into the thought process organizationally? I mean, obviously the zeitgeist is moving in the direction of diversity and inclusion and celebrating and embracing that. AVIXA has been a champion of that for a while, but it seems like it's become even more forward-facing organizationally. So can you tell us a little bit about the reasoning behind that, why you're embracing it so much now?
We have amazing leaders, both internally and in our volunteer organizations, and Charmaine represents that wholeheartedly. Our Women's Council, our Diversity Council, and all of those who have been bringing this front of mind for a number of years. The real impetus to this started in late May. We were in the height of COVID. And we were also in the height of a cultural conversation. And I think that we all know where we were on the day that George Floyd was murdered and what that meant to each of us and all of the other people that we have not named today and in the past. And for us, AVIXA looked at it and we started with, it's not our place to make a comment. We're a pro AV organization. And within really a number of days, we realized that not making a statement said a whole lot more than what making a statement would be. But it was important that when we made the statement, there was heart behind it and there was passion and there was a real desire for change. And with that statement came what we have internally called our internal diversity task force. But it is a group of volunteers. And as one of them mentioned, it's a volunteer army and it's been amazing to be a part of it. But that team came together and said, how can we make change? What are the things that we can do? And we worked for a number of months. And what you're seeing now is some of the output of that, of how can we create real positive change and how can we be accountable to the things that we're saying. So that came with research and that came with education resources and self-guided education. It's not our place to tell anyone what to do or how to do it, but we can certainly provide resources to guide that path. And Charmaine and the entirety of her Diversity Council have been so thoughtful and incredible and impactful in their feedback in sharing with us what to do and how to do and where we can go.
Why don't you talk about some of those efforts, Charmaine, with respect specifically to the Diversity Council?
Well, it's a lot of efforts, right? So one of the things we realized when the council started 3 years ago was that, yes, as Joey said, there's a lack of expression of diversity AV workers, diverse AV workers in the industry. How do you bring that forward? How do you enable progress in their succession in this career, in this industry, right? So we decided the three main initiatives were more education, more communication, and more events and the abilities to bring everyone together, right? To network. So that's what we did. We formed the subcommittees within the council in order to do those things. Since then, we've had regional events, we have our Infocom events, our own standalone annual event to bring people together and network and make it easier for diverse AV workers to connect to the old guard. You say old white boys, I say old guard, the old guard of AV, and really find commonality within each other and start connecting more. So that's been successful. A lot of people I'm happy to see, especially when I look at my social media every day, are connecting more and more with people they normally wouldn't connect with. And they're finding those commonalities. On the education side, we've been working with a lot of tech schools nationally and doing workshops, things like Lincoln Tech, working with them, working with the Loop Lab a little bit, and other institutes like that to help with getting those certifications, those trainings to bring the talent, more diverse talent into AV. Successfully so far, the count is about 35 since we started of people that we worked with that are now employed in the industry and are certified and companies not worrying about that initial capital expenditure to get it there, because normally that was the pain. A company would have to pay an entry-level person to get them there. Now they're coming into the industry with those certifications, and also communicating the importance of diversity. So that's the third part of our main initiatives, to make those communications through social media, through all the efforts of all the council members, everyone on our council that does a podcast, like Frank Patakala, who's on our council, like Alexis LeBroy, like Giovanni. Everyone is communicating out, and not really only about diversity. They're communicating about the industry they love and that they grew in, but they happen to be diverse, and they're showing the value of that diverse thought, which is bringing about new ideas that people are like, oh, I didn't think about it that way. And that's been working very well as well. So, in the last 3 years, you'll see a lot of different people, a lot of them part of our councils in the publications, speaking on panels, speaking at events. People are becoming more knowledgeable about these particular workers, their different diverse thoughts, and making those connections. So that's really the core of our efforts and what we've been doing and what we're going to continue to do as we keep going.
And those efforts obviously have been tremendously successful. And I completely agree with you that there's been a tremendous consciousness raising and just an increased level of awareness of these kinds of issues throughout the commercial AV family. So that leads us to the AV Industry Pledge for an Equitable Future, which has seemed to have gotten tremendous outpouring of support. A lot of people, I believe, already are signatories to it. What is the pledge exactly? What are people pledging their support to, and what are they pledging to do?
So the pledge is really just a first step. It feels like a culmination of a lot of effort for AVIXA, but it is really just a first step, and it's that hand raise, right? It's yes, I stand for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. I stand to hear from others and to raise up those voices. And the pledge is, it's about fostering awareness, it's about taking action, and it's about being accountable. So when you sign the pledge, whether as an individual or as a corporation, we want you to get more involved. We would like you to think about joining the Diversity Council or join Diversity Council-led events. We want you to take part in the research that we're doing. That includes the survey that the Diversity Council has recently posted. That includes our member survey. And not because it's for AVIXA, but truly because it's going to set the accountability go forward. We want to know what's going on in the industry, and we've never really tracked it. So this is about learning how many women do we have in executive leadership positions? How do your companies handle diversity, inclusion programs? This is about being able to be accountable to our Infocom stages and be transparent about how many of the old guard are up on stage and how many of the new folks are we bringing in. And then it's also about sharing how this has impacted your organization, your work, your life in the future. We have many more hills to climb, but to be able to come back in, whether that's later this year or into next year, and say, so we tried a program and here's how it was challenging, here's what worked, and here's what didn't. That's how we all learn. We lean into these conversations, we're willing to have them, and we get better every day.
Absolutely. And Charmaine, with respect to what Joey just alluded to, the Diversity Council having launched a survey, can you tell us a bit about the survey, the information you're collecting, and what it's going to be used in service of?
Absolutely. So again, when we started 3 years ago, we didn't know where to begin. We didn't know what diversity existed and what type. So we started on a path with those efforts and those 3 main efforts in mind. And then we started learning slowly but surely. But now we're at a point where we believe the AV community has a trust in the Diversity Council, right? And what we've been doing. And so now we're kindly asking them to tell us who and what diversity exists with this industry in every region. We've learned a lot just having the council of, the different groups that do exist and where, but we absolutely want to learn more, right? We want to learn more about, what type of positions they hold in AV. We want to learn about what kind of initiatives, if any, because we need to learn how to go forward and enable more awareness programs, events, and better tailor it. We know, for example, in APAC region, there's a lot of diversity issues centered around different religious beliefs, right? That's part of it. We also know there's a lot of, in the APAC region alone, there's a tremendous amount of diversity only in that region alone. And you just take that region as a whole and it's vast, it's deeper than anyone else would understand. Once you dig in, we need to dig in more so we can make accessible events, information, programming to these particular people available. And in concert with AVIXA and its efforts, probably get more programs that are affordable, right? Things that, not every AV worker has the ability to get a certain type of training because they're on this level. They're not here. They want to progress. And we have a feedback section in the survey to kind of give us additional things that, what else should we know? What else do we need to know? Are you disabled? Maybe, okay. We're an AV industry. We specialize in creating ADA spaces, right? ADA compliant spaces. So we need to understand how much of that exists of each one so we can also acclimate what we do in this industry to those different diverse audiences, especially where disabilities and different genders and everything is concerned. So we need to know. And that way we can plan and we can move forward much more effectively in bringing forth some things that would be of interest to these groups and helpful.
Absolutely. In terms of moving forward, I think all of us need access to resources to kind of make us aware of our own blind spots. For example, using the incorrect pronouns with people, things of that nature. We need to be aware of where we are blind or where we're just not cognizant. So what resources has AVIXA put forth or has the Diversity Council put forth to help AV industry members who want to raise their own consciousness?
The Diversity Council does a tremendous job of bringing in speakers on a regular basis to explore multiple topics. What AVIXA has done on our side is we have compiled resources from across every industry, not particularly that of AV, but useful, whether it's written materials, videos, and even our own pieces that can help people to guide them through the process in short, easy to manage episodes per se. I don't know that many people that get online and say, I want to learn about diversity today. But, you know, if you've got 5 minutes and you can watch somebody explain what their experience is and you can learn something from it, that's a path forward. So we've been compiling resources that we've made available across the website, and we will continue to update those on a regular basis. And I would love to hear from the industry to tell us, hey, this was something that I watched, this was something that I took part in. I'd love for other people to do that as well. So in addition to all of those free resources, there is also an inclusive language guide, which comes together based on an event that the Diversity Council had in December. And we worked with several top folks and companies to start what can be used as an inclusive language guide. We really focused in on the technology terms that cause issue. So easy enough to talk about master slave language, male, female inputs and outputs. Those are probably the easiest and most talked about, but it covers lots of other areas as well. It's not meant to be the all inclusive for everything you say every day. But it is definitely that starting place. And in addition to that, we've also partnered with Nonprofit HR, who has developed a 30-minute unconscious bias training that's available. And all of that is free and easy to access.
Absolutely. And then as for the Diversity Council, again, Joey alluded to the webinars. So we've been really focused on webinars that teach how the value of diversity bolsters the value of AV. The one thing and the problem that AV has is it doesn't tell on itself enough. And I'm coming from an IT background, right? So when people say, what is AV? And I have 400 different ways of explaining what it is, because the regular general technology population is still trying to grasp who we are. So the webinars that we've been using is kind of using diversity to kind of talk about who AV is and also expressing that through diversity. And interestingly enough, the diverse voices, then panelists that are on our webinar have actually bled out into the other tech sectors to get them interested to see what else AV is doing. So it's a great way of getting people, what the webinars that we're doing, to teach them about the value of diversity, inclusive language. We have one on neurodiversity coming up next month. We had one talking about the statistics of how many businesses are putting, inclusivity and diverse KPIs into your RFPs and the value that it will lend to your business, right? So it's just a lot to teach the AV industry of how it can grow beyond its walls and get synergy with the other tech sectors, the network, the cybersecurity, the IT, and really, really, bolster their value. And so that's very important, and the value of the diverse workers in there, but diversity is helping to do that.
Absolutely. And I think synergizing ourselves with all of those other disciplines, those peripheral disciplines to ours, will redound to all of our benefits. And I feel like this forward-looking view toward embracing inclusivity and diversity is really putting the AV industry in its very best light. When you look at AV Tweep's Twitter, for example, you see a beautiful tapestry of AV professionals, every different background, every different race, every different creed, various gender identities. And I think it really puts us in our very best light. And I think we're going to see that at InfoComm in person in Orlando in October. I feel like it's probably a bit too soon to be talking about specific dates and times, but can you allude in general to whether there are going to be diversity and inclusion related events during the show?
Absolutely, without question. Every year since we started, we've had one, and they've all been successful. And each year we try to up the ante a little bit and do something interesting at each one, something different, something new. So we absolutely have one. Usually it takes place, a diversity reception or / meeting or event takes place at InfoComm, usually the day before the last day of InfoComm. So usually it's on the Thursday or the Friday. So more information to come. We're hoping to make it really exciting and really interesting, even further than we did the year that we were last there. So yes.
Can't wait for it. So before we wrap, do either of you have any closing thoughts on the importance of AVIXA and the Diversity Council's efforts in this regard, or just the importance of AV professionals in general, recognizing not only the existing diversity of their peers in their industry, but the importance of further diversifying it and bringing in different perspectives, and moreover, embracing an inclusive atmosphere and an inclusive mindset?
I think that this is about belonging, and we all belong in AV. Those of us that work in AV are incredibly passionate about it. And we want everyone to feel that belonging. I have personally signed the pledge. Dave Labuscas has personally signed the pledge, and we mean what we say. And I hope that you will join us, not only because diversity is good for your business, but because it is good for all of us. And it is just as important today as it was when we incepted the program. I think we've all been watching the news, and there continues across our country and across the world, there continues to be a lack of understanding and so much more. So stand up, sign the pledge. I signed the pledge.
Absolutely. And I too sign the pledge on behalf not only of myself, but of Sound and Communications. And I encourage everyone watching this to do so as well, not as a perfunctory gesture, but because you really intend to step forward into embracing diversity and inclusivity. I thank you very much, Joey and Charmaine, for joining us this morning and trumpeting this very important message, which Sound and Communications will continue to do its best to trumpet as well. Joé Lloyd, Senior Director of Communications at AVIXA, and Charmaine Torruella, Diversity Council Chair and GMS Account Manager for Verrex. Very much appreciate your time and your good work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.